Good morning, everyone. This is quite exciting. It's an honor for me to really be joined by amazing educators, and we'll just take some time to introduce ourselves. So I'll start introducing myself. I live in Ottawa, Canada, and I teach French immersion for grade 8 students. And I believe in students' agency and having to connect students to take action globally and locally. So I'll have Veronica go next.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Veronica Boix-Mansilla, and I'm a principal investigator at Project Zero at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I do work on global competence and on a project called Reimagining Migration. I'm especially glad to be here today because I began my work in education as an English as a second language teacher. So I love being in the family, so to speak.
Connie?
Hello, I'm Connie Rensink, and I'm the Director of Global Education and Outreach at the International Education and Resource Network, which is IERN USA. And I am a former elementary school teacher, and the school I taught in, again, was ESL based, over 31 countries represented, and so a lot of diversity there. But now I work with teachers and educators across the US, particularly getting connected with other classrooms across the world through the IERN network to do project-based learning classroom to classroom. And I am delighted to be here and honored to be part of this panel.
Barbara?
Hello, everybody. My name is Zielonka. I'm an English teacher working at Nylandka High School in Norway. For the past 10 years, I've been actively involved in the process of designing global projects. I'm also a great fan of connections-based teaching and learning, and I'm really happy to be here today with you.
Thank you, everyone. And as mentioned in the title of the discussion, really, it's learning is co-designing with the students. And I'm just going to address this to Connie. What skills do students need for global collaboration?
So the PISA has recently been actually measuring global competencies, and there are many, and I was going to say Veronica could be the expert here because she was at the founding of many of these, but really thinking about the critical thinking as students connect global and local issues. Communication and dialogue skills are really vital across diverse audiences, so being able to make those adjustments. Understanding and respecting each other's cultures, of course, and building that empathy, and then taking that learning to action so that it's not something that's passive, but something that they're actively working with, are pieces that we emphasize.
Yes, those connections, not only just collaboration within the classroom, but also connecting and collaborating and having those essential language and skills for them to collaborate globally as well, and learning from each other's and valuing each other's thinking. So Barbara, how do you manage global projects successfully?
So first of all, it's extremely important to have a good plan and to collaborate with teachers who are really passionate and who would like to make that effort, because it is a time-consuming thing, but it's really worth it. So first of all, I usually start with finding good project management tools. And for the past 2 years, I have used Microsoft Teams, and this year I'm also using Milenote. And when we start the whole process, we sit together, we have lots of discussions, we spend a lot of time finding things that we have in common and finding things that are different in our curriculum, because we teach in different countries and we have diverse number of teachers and students. So sometimes we face lots of challenges, but at the same time, when we have a common plan that we can follow, the project will be successful, and at the end of the project, all the parties will be satisfied with what we have achieved. But it's important to remember that there are lots of long-term and short-term goals, because I'm creating projects that take more than 8 months. These are not short-term projects, but they take many, many weeks. So it's really important to be well prepared and have a plan before you jump into all these different goals you want to fulfill.
I like how you mentioned that curriculum, because curriculum is the real world, and taking those overall expectations or essential ideas and having students unpack the curriculum and discover those along the way. And I think that's the key to rich learning, because not only that they become designers and agents of the learning, but also they take that leadership and develop their all their skills, from reading to writing, and having to design as well, and have to go through a process. That learning is evolving and it's an ongoing. So Veronica, I know you have a lot of experience in many things, but regarding foreign languages, and you mentioned about the frame of contemporary discussions about global competencies and equity, global education. So what might that practice look like? Can you please share some more with us?
I'm really trying to get to 2 p.m. one day without being, you're muted, Veronica, without receiving the other. So I am a big admirer of Connie's work and the types of projects that Barbara is describing. I think that this, they bring this sort of a very authentic experience for kids. And I think that for this particular community, the results of the PISA assessment are very interesting, because they show that kids who are bilingual or who have the opportunity to learn more than one language, which are many kids around the world, happen to also be more respectful of other cultures. So there's like a relation there between, multilingualism and respect for other cultures, open-mindedness, so to speak. So I think that that's exciting news for this community. And to me, one of the things that I've been thinking about is, what is different in a way when we think about teaching a second language or a third language today versus in the past? What is it that the world of today is in a way presenting to us that we need to be responding? And if I think about it, is on the one hand, never before has humanity been so connected, also so disconnected, but never before did we have the level of like the universal sort of a level, or almost universal level of exchange and interaction that we have on the planet today. And I think that presents a new landscape for us in teaching foreign languages and what that might look like, and or teaching English as a second language, as that might look like. So I think it presents important puzzles also as to me, why, what is the purpose of the work that we do? How do we position this work geopolitically, because it's not that we're only teaching in a classroom, but we're teaching in the world. And then how do we make sure that language operates as a gateway into other people's lives and other people's cultures and so forth? And during the conversation, I think I can expand on a few of these ideas, but let me just perhaps close with like one anecdote of a project that we're doing with immigrant origin children in Portland, Maine. And I think that this is, to me, one of the central puzzles in this field right now. Hasim writes a narrative. This is a student who is an immigrant refugee kid, and writes a narrative about the issue of, second grade, issue of, attention in the family, about the grandmother wanting to go back to Somalia, and a lot of fighting in the family. So the narrative is structured in very sort of simple English, sort of put together, stitched together. The teacher, who's a really very well-intended teacher, sees this narrative as very problematic in the sense that it opens up the life of Hasim, but she feels unprepared to respond to this life. She feels unprepared to open up the conversation about what does it mean to live in these two cultures, to manage more than one language for this child. And then she chooses to respond to the mandates that she had, which was to check for common core standards, appropriateness of punctuation and grammar and so forth, and delivery of that paragraph. To me, that was very interesting because, of course, we worked with this teacher and we ended up getting to know Hasim. But I think that what we need to be thinking about in teaching foreign languages is, how do we teach the language without forgetting the child as a whole? How do we really think about the whole child? And the language is a fundamental capacity that we have as human beings to express our views, to collaborate with others, to create novel societies. And I think that in the map that Paul was describing earlier, I think that there's so much capacity that our children bring. So this end of that bridge that we were seeing a little bit earlier, there's so much work that we need to be doing there to see and to empower children and students to share what they bring to the beginning of a conversation about another language that really would set us in a much, much richer sense for them and for further learning.
Yes, it is about co-constructing knowledge, and it's about collaborating. It's all those essential skills that the students bring, not only their background knowledge, their culture, but also having to bring that um, diversity to the learning as well, and giving them voices. And I think that's the equity when students are engaged in these rich projects, or locally or globally, that they are their voices, and they, as we had said earlier, their leadership develops as well. So Barbara, what are the benefits of different cultures in global project management?
So they're amazing, and I think that the list is very exhaustive, because we really need to involve project members that come from different cultures and ethnicities, and our places, our countries are already very multicultural. And of course, there are challenges that we may face where we manage these multicultural teams that participate in our projects. But we have to prepare our students for that world where employers, future employers are going to look for employees who do have empathy, cross-cultural communication, who are trying to think outside of the box, and who have already collaborated with people across different nations who do speak different languages, because it's not only about speaking English, it's also important about speaking other foreign languages and making sure that you know how to solve conflicts with people coming from different countries, or how can you help students develop cross-cultural communication during project work or simply during teaching. But it's, from my perspective of an educator working in Norway, now almost all companies are looking for future employers that do have these skills that show students how important this way of sharing what you can is with other people you are going to work in the future.
Yes, that global competencies, and that's character development, that citizenship development, that is the key. And this is the skills that the students are acquiring right now, because knowledge is for free, and learning is a human process. So how are they connecting the learning and building, not only co-constructing knowledge, but knowledge is knowledge for free, but then how does it become understanding and the applications of things? So Connie, I'm going to ask which about the students that they are fostering many global competencies. So how does that work for you?
So what we work with in our organization is our network connects classrooms to classrooms, as I mentioned, in this project-based learning experience. And the student absorbs knowledge, but they also co-create the knowledge. And so we use the Sustainable Development Goals. We aligned all of our projects with the Sustainable Development Goals, and they may learn some basic information about those issues globally. But then they're invited to really research their local community of those issues and what they care about personally. And building on that personal interest, then they share it back and forth with the other country or the other classrooms around the world. And so that really helps them start to expand their cultural context. And it also helps build those partnerships across. And that really opens up their ability to go deeper into understanding the issues. It's that global to local combination of really building that understanding for themselves, but then also of their partners.
Sorry, I just had some difficulty with my audio, so I think I'm back on. I was just going to switch over, but I think we're good right now. Yes, it is. It's about co-constructing knowledge and building that environment, that space of expressing themselves, having voices, that space of not only feeling safe that they can express themselves, but they can tackle any hard problems around the world, any wicked problems, and adapting that, looking at experts within their community, looking at people also globally as experts. So I'm going to go to Veronica now. And Veronica, you've talked a little bit about the foreign languages. And so it is languages contextualization in local and global dynamics, and geopolitical landscape. So can you please just express or share more about that context, please?
Yeah, I was thinking about the following, and I think that Connie got us started in this direction, in a sense of saying, so what is the version of languages that we teach? So when I was a child, I was in love with languages, and I studied, French and German and so forth. And of course, you had this version of you needed to learn the proper English and the proper German and the high Deutsch, the Hochdeutsch, and you name it. Right? So, and and yet languages are very malleable. Languages have all sorts of versions that are contextual. And then there's the French that people speak in Paris, but there's also the French that people speak in Martinique. And there's the Portuguese that people speak in Portuguese, but also the Portuguese that people, and they're both Portuguese. So the question for me, as we prepare kids for a very dynamic, multicultural world in which mixture, hybridity, multiplicity become the norm, and we're working with schools that really operate on an assumption of homogeneity, that all kids are the same age, know the same, that every child needs to learn the same types of standards and so forth. So I think that from a foreign languages perspective, this group is uniquely positioned to really open up the possibility of revisiting what are the underlying messages that we send when we teach French or English or Chinese or you have it. For example, in Brazil, many, many years ago, there was a woman who's an anthropologist who designed a program to teach young children how to learn English. Now, her idea, and she spent 6 months in the Amazon to develop this program, her idea was that the reason why Brazilian children needed to speak English was not to learn about how the Buckingham Palace works, or not necessarily to learn about how important and fantastic Times Square was, yet that was important, but that the essential function of learning English in Brazil was to be able to tell the folk stories and the deep traditions, Brazilian traditions, in English to another audience. So what I think about is when we think about which versions, whose stories, whose voices we're elevating, the question for us working across languages is, are we reinstating a more colonial view of how language operates in the world? Or are we really opening up the minds of our children and our students to understand that English has many different versions, and that the appropriateness of the version has not to do with how exact the pronunciation is, or how complex the question is, or how complex the sentence is, but how appropriate to a particular context it is. Because if somebody asks me for directions, I may say, you go one block this way, one block that way, and that may be a very simple response, but it will be the most appropriate for context. If I explain in very complex ways how to get there and produce a very complex sentence, so to speak, that sentence would be inappropriate to the question that I was asked. So I think that the shift for us in thinking about language is, how do we empower the variations in a language, really saying that if I speak informal English is appropriate for a context, academic English is appropriate for another context. And it is not the case that academic English is the only version of English that we should be learning. So how do we work with the notion of accents and what they mean? I love Lisa Delpit's claim that language is the skin that we speak. So how do we recognize in language the beauty of the opportunity to understand somebody else's identity? And then how do we do that in a way that really elevates, really brings up the voices that are typically unheard? So when thinking about teaching many languages, I think that we have a terrific opportunity there.
Yes, thank you for highlighting that, because when you give students authentic audiences, they elevate their learning, not only like we have talked about developing their competencies, but also elevating their skills in communicating and appreciating each other's as well. So Barbara, I know there was something about for secondary classrooms. Could you please tell us what grades you teach, and also like how can global projects help students become global citizens as well with older kids?
So my students are between 15 and 18 years old, and most of them do not speak English as their first language, even though from time to time I may have students whose parents do come from English-speaking countries, but it's not happening very often. So first of all, connecting online truly opens a world of possibilities to students and helps them become global citizens, because not only do they collaborate with other students in the class, but they also work with students from all over the world, which means that they can create their own professional, maybe not professional, but personal learning networks. And it's that first step that they make when they talk to students using Skype or Zoom, and when they discuss what their interests are, what their passions are. And at the same time, they have to develop empathy, a sense of responsibility, and that connectedness, because they are a part of a bigger community. So they have to make sure that what they do is somehow showing these students who we collaborate with who they are as Norwegians, but at the same time who they are as global citizens. So they do have that sense of their role as global citizens or world citizens. They have to value diversity. They have to show respect towards each other. And they also have to be taught, or they learn how to tackle social justice, because it depends what kind of projects we focus on, but they try to take action in order to make that world more equitable. And in our last project that we had last year, sustainable consumption project, for example, they had to show how to live and promote sustainable way of life. So there are amazing opportunities out there, and we've never had so many amazing opportunities to simply showcase what our students are able to do and what that final product is. So I'm not the only person assessing what they are doing, because they have to use social media networking sites in order to show what they are good at. And that's probably the biggest advantage of all these different projects that we have had in the past years.
Yes, I like what you highlighted, the empathy, because empathy is the center of all when you're connecting globally, or even when you're building your safe environment in the classroom. And having to develop that empathy is the key. And learning is designing, and a lot of the process that we take is the design thinking or designing. It's a process. Learning is a process, like you have said, and they have that global citizenship as well that's attached to it, and developing other skills from collaboration, communication, critical thinking, having to analyze everything. Collecting data is a huge part of this process as well. And so the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Global Goals, is the essence of that. And there are so many organizations that we're going to be tweeting out later, or putting them on the chat, that to really embark on that process and join them from STEAM to high school to kindergarten. And there's just limitless and endless ways to join. So Connie, I know you talk about a lot of the SDGs. So what are some effective ways students are learning about the Sustainable Development Global Goals, and how can they make a difference?
So there are a couple of ways I like to do this, and I have done this as a consultant, and then I've done this in the work that I do now. But an introduction to the Sustainable Development Goals really goes a long way. It creates a framework. The 17 goals are there, and giving students the opportunity of choice. And I think teachers really have to think about, are they going to do an intro of all of them? And I think that's really vital. But then would they narrow it down to 4 or 5 that students could choose from for the manageability of a teacher's standpoint? But really giving students a chance to dig in more and look at, as I mentioned earlier, those global to local challenges. One of the projects that we do is called Girl Rising. And so it's an opportunity for students to learn about girls' education across the world through vignettes. And then as they study that, then they think about how that applies to their local community. They look at what education issues are and how they can connect. I think it's also really critical as I'm talking is that the global competencies don't sit over here with the SDGs over here. It's how it blends together. And so one of the critical pieces that we spend time on are those dialogue skills at the beginning of, are you listening to respond, or are you listening to ask a deeper question and have better understanding? And that's how you gain the richness of both cultures or many cultures coming together.
Veronica, I know you have a lot to add on to this, but you know, as mentioned, it is the more they develop the SDGs, the more their language development, their global competencies. You don't separate them really, because when students are embarked in this learning, they're embedding above and beyond the curriculum and above and beyond their everyday life. So please add on to that.
What I think is really exciting about this area of work is, is that all of a sudden the world is in the classroom, and it's in the classroom for real, and kids understand that what they're learning in the classroom is relevant to what's happening around outside of the classroom. And this I think is a renewal, of energy from K to 12 and more. As Paul was suggesting earlier, I think that to a great degree, engagement, and as Connie is saying, and Barbara too, sort of the idea of really engaging the whole child or the whole student in a task that feels larger than themselves, larger than the immediate, larger than I think it gives education, it gives students a sense of vision about who they are in the world. And what I notice is in the work that we do is that it also gives teachers a very different sense of the professional purpose, the professional identity. Sort of I always remember Michael, one of the teachers with whom we work, who used to say, I used to read things for my job as a teacher, and then other things like The Economist or the newspaper and what have you, as a person. And now I cannot tell the difference between the two. And I'm really hoping that classrooms become this place in which kids get to read in multiple languages, and they can't tell the difference between what they read for school and homework and what they read because they enjoy, because they're curious about the world, because they would like to. So that continuity, I think that that these projects are allowing is really, to me, essential. And it speaks to that notion that we're not preparing the children of the future, the citizens of the future, that the kids at age 3 in the projects that we have on global competence in early childhood are already participating and shaping their environment, shaping their neighborhoods. And so the beauty of languages in this context is, the tools that kids develop in order to make that happen.
Well, we've been posting in the chat some of the amazing links and projects that we have all embarked on, and we continue. There's so many that's going on. You can even start one as by yourself, like within your school community, and there's just endless of ways of connecting on social media, which we already all know that as well. So I just wanted to go on to, we talk about strategies and skills, and so much is being developed as students, like everyone has mentioned, they are co-constructing knowledge, building that knowledge. There are so many strategies and learning tools that we could use, and endless of things. We can spend 5 more hours talking about that, and having kids to really find the causes and factors and consequences to things, and find ways to collect data and share their data and interview people and connect to experts and all kinds of things. So Barbara, how to start a global partnership now, as we've shared a lot of those links, and where do you find partners?
So probably the easiest way to find partners would be on Twitter. This is what I did a couple of years ago, and it was really easy. I remember my first tweet, it was very, very simple. I simply asked others whether there would be at least one teacher who'd like to start a global project with me. And 2 ladies, one from Portugal and one from Italy, replied after 5 minutes. And it was really amazing, because I thought that I would have to wait for a response for a couple of days. And 10 years ago, we started our first project, and we are still collaborators. We work together. And this year, we have a new project called Single Voices, Global Choices. And another platform that I use very often that is very popular among European teachers is eTwinning. And it's a platform for teachers of different subjects, and you can join different projects, but at the same time, you can suggest your own project and you can find teachers who would like to join you. And everybody's on social media networking sites. So wherever you are, just send a message and I'm sure that there will be somebody who's going to reply and will be willing to give it a go.
Yes, it's amazing how generous people are with their time and their classrooms. And I find it not only like the educators and they want to connect, but also finding experts like, having to problem solve. You can contact any scientist from anywhere in the world. And it's amazing how easy it is and makes those connections so rich. So Connie, I know you do a lot with SDGs as well, as you have already mentioned. So what are some effective ways students are learning about the Sustainable Development Goals, which you already shared, and what advice do you have for teachers joining global collaborative projects?
For teachers joining collaborative project is to just do some of your research and to really be thinking about your partner classroom and how when's good timing for them to work, doing some pre-discussion with that teacher on the front end so that you have a good collaboration and you have the structure set up so that it's going to run smoothly for your students. More and more, obviously, in the world that we're living in today, this is happening virtually for students as well. And so thinking about what those activities are going to be, many of ours are done on discussion boards or through Flipgrid so that they can be done asynchronously. Time zones, of course, are a challenge for everyone, potentially. And so thinking about where those classrooms are across the world, as well as I said, really spending the time on the dialogue skills at the front end to create a better space in the long run is really critical. As far as the Sustainable Development Goals, there's also an organization called Teach SDGs that has a collaboration, and The World's Largest Lesson are both two really amazing resources for students of all ages, for people to get connected. And I would be remiss to mention that our projects at iEarn.org, we have over 100, and all of those are aligned with the SDGs.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat. Most of them are free. None of them require really a fee per se. So all of the platforms are free for connecting students globally as well. And I know that some of you have asked in the chat as well that all the links will be shared via email. I know Vicky had already replied to some of you about that. So Veronica, is there anything you'd like to share with these amazing educators who are already probably embarking or going forward with students' global collaboration?
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is exciting that adds sort of to the mix of really powerful tools in our experience is at Project Zero, we developed something called thinking routines. And essentially, these are very, very small interventions that are very, very easy for teachers to learn, so to speak. And they're designed to, in a way, to be used many, many times in order to develop certain habits of mind, or what we call dispositions. So, for example, one of them is called See, Think, Wonder. So imagine presenting kids with an image of water, of questions of sustainability and water availability, and one of the SDGs, and you have just one image, and regardless of the level of this language, our target language that students may have, the question is, what do you see? And here the image could be a work of art, it could be a photograph, but in the process of naming what kids see, they're developing both the slowing down, slow looking, close observation, the types of habits, if you wish, of really slowing down in order to really capture what they see in a scene, in a situation, in a portrait, in a person. Second step then becomes, what does this make you think about? And of course, kids will have the vocabulary, or they will need the vocabulary. They will have the response, will need the responses. But the attention is not so much on the language per se, but really on the act of trying to interpret what's going on in the scene, or what's going on in this image or this work of art. So second question is, what does this make you think about? Now, what's really interesting when teachers begin to use this is that the question doesn't have a right or wrong answer. There's no particular vocabulary. There's not a beginning stem, sentence. It's what kids think about. And what's amazing is how much we discover of what kids bring, the complexities of theories and ideas and so forth that kids can bring to an interpretation of an image, and the discovery on the part of us as teachers of the variability, the background knowledge, the capacities, the interpretive capacities that kids have. And the third question, this particular routine is, what do you wonder about? So in a sense, it's like really not closing with an interpretation, but really, an interpretation, but really opening up for more questions and so forth. So in a very, very simple see, think, wonder routine that gets repeated over time, what we notice is that kids develop not only the capacity to begin to share and get accustomed to sharing their thoughts and be empowered to share their thoughts, to use the language that they have or the language that they need in order to do so, but also sort of the habit of curiosity and sort of open-mindedness and the possibility of really. And so there are a variety. You'll see, I just posted on the site, on the chat, sort of the collection of thinking routines. There's about 70 of them, and some of them are about perspective taking. So it's about putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and so forth. And many of them are and we have a whole batch of global thinking routines that we've developed. So I'll also put the link there, because some of them are quite specifically designed for a global competence framework. So I'll put that link as well.
Yes, I know that I teach in French. Je ne sais pas si quelqu'un parle en français. So it doesn't matter what language really you're teaching is. What counts is the skill that students are developing. And like you have mentioned from Project Zero, importing all those tools, thinking tools. I know I do chalk and talk. I love that. And bridging, there's so many tools to use with the students and to practice. And I like the sense that you become a co-learner with them. It doesn't look perfect at the beginning, which I'm going to get to Barbara's thing, that there are so many pitfalls throughout this process. And that's the key for learning, because discomfort is learning. And if it's not, we're not really looking at the challenges and looking how we can build those challenges up together. So Barbara, what are the pitfalls of managing global projects?
Sorry. I think that starting too big may be the biggest pitfall. If you have too many goals, if there are too many teachers and too many students, that may be very demanding. And at the end, you will find out that unfortunately you haven't connected with too many classes, and that connections were not the way you wanted them to be. So if I were a newbie and if I have never had that experience, that I would probably focus on 1 or 2 international partners. And another thing that I have experienced during the past 10 years is that sometimes teachers are very enthusiastic in the beginning, but after a couple of weeks, they lose interest, and then you are sometimes left alone. But it is something that may happen to everybody, and it's important to have that experience and to learn from that experience.
If I could piggyback on that, I would say also that you may want to start with a shorter project. So really get in and get your feet wet and get your kids having that experience across, and really focus on the connection. The connection for student to student is, to me, the most important. There's a wonderful quote, and I misquote it often, but it's, once your mind is opened, it can't be closed. And so it's once you have that experience and that connection to something across the world, really, that then sets you up for the next experience. And we do have many people who come in who will do a shorter project and then do a longer project later as building blocks, if you will.
Veronica?
I forgot what the question was.
Any pitfalls? Or how do we start small and grow big?
These pitfalls for the collaborations. I think in what I have seen, I think that sometimes when the collaboration involves students who are I think it's the pitfall of perspective taking and respect for dialogue, right? So I think that sometimes it is possible for a collaboration. I think that that's also why Connie is insisting on us really setting the norms for dialogue. That sometimes when a collaboration takes place, one pitfall is that the assumptions that young students have about each other, about other cultures and so forth, get played out in the open, and sometimes that can be offensive and hurtful and so forth. So I think that's something to take into account. In our own research, the other pitfall actually is one of students thinking or believing, and they come to believe, with data on this, that they come to believe that because they met this one student in China, they understand China as a whole. And I think that generalization is a very, very typical one. It's our brains seem to do this all the time. So the question is, how do we really allow for that openness and really looking at that possibility, that avoiding that overgeneralization. But it is a sort of an exemplification bias that we have, as cognitively speaking, so to speak. So I think that those are two that I perhaps would want to pay attention to.
Fantastic. And I love the way you have mentioned perspectives, because not only that you're developing the global perspective, because and those unconscious biases that the students also within the classroom, they develop and bring that up. And so let's not make assumptions to things by just generalizing. And I like Barbara mentioned Noah's Daniel. Noah has a lot of the building outside the blocks, and some amazing also on her site. If I get a chance fast enough, or I'll send it to Vicky, she can probably put those on as well, because she does a lot with the identity development from the playlist of P3 and what's in a name, and building those community things are amazing. So our time is up. We're over a minute and we can go on forever. So I don't know if you want to unmute and you all just say this was amazing and thank you so much. We're always learn together. It's a collective learning effort from everybody. And anything else? Anyone else? Last words?
Thank you so much, Rola. It was really fantastic to do this with you.